Hello everyone, we are just waiting for more people to come and we will start in a few minutes. Okay, welcome everyone. I'm Eva, the Marketing Director of Catenda, and I will be the moderator of this session. Please, if you have any question, you can ask them in the section box and we will answer them at the end. Now, Ovad, I think you can start.
Thank you very much, and welcome to this webinar. I've been putting a little bold title on here, How Being Open Will Save the Planet. I think it's actually true, and I think there is a lot to be said about being open. This is a theme that has been interesting to me for a long time. I think when I was brought up in a pretty normal environment in Norway, the environment that I was in had put a great value on being open, sharing with each other and trying to not hide anything too much unless it was necessary and so forth. So I always felt that being open is a good thing and has some interesting power in it, if you will. So that's why I'm very happy to share some of my thoughts on this topic and some of the ideas that we have in Catenda about how being open will save the planet. I'd like to start with a quote from Leonard Cohen. He is a great poet, and he wrote in one of his songs called Anthem, "There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in." So the way I sort of read this is that everything has some kind of mistakes or not, some imperfections to it. But because it has some imperfections, because there are some mistakes, that's also where you can get some light in or get some innovation or get some unexpected results. So even the very sort of known universe that we live in, it started out with a big bang, we believe, and the current theory is that there was some kind of, in the beginnings, all the gas or whatever it was reasonably evenly distributed out there. But because it wasn't perfectly evenly distributed, there was some lumps and some collections of higher density than others. This started the whole sort of process that led to galaxies and planetary systems that we have today. So because of the imperfection, if you will, in the beginnings, at least according to Hawkins in some book or another, we are able to have life and consciousness in our current universe. So the perfection and the cracks or the openings is where the light comes in and where we can expect to have some great things happening. So how will being open save the planet? That is the big question I'll try to answer today. And if we go totally on the opposite side, if you sort of imagine that everyone is living in their own silo, nobody can talk to each other or communicate with each other, everything is closed and isolated, I think for most of us, our intuition will tell us that this is not necessarily the right way to fix the climate change that we're seeing on our planet today. So if you do the opposite of being open, you sort of feel and understand that that's not the best way forward for us to solve a very complex problem. It's a diverse planet with lots of opinions, lots of interest groups, lots of people, lots of technology, lots of various interests in terms of monetary value and so forth. So the problem is not easy to fix. But since the opposite side of open, being very close, is not the way, perhaps we can find something of a solution in the other way. So I believe that everyone kind of feels that there is something powerful about an open attitude and the open way, if you will. Doing something in a more open way brings something more to the table than if we close things off. So I think we all kind of feel this. It's not a sort of coincidence, if you will, that the freedom of speech is being curtailed in some countries, some regions. Freedom of speech is powerful and will threaten the status quo sometimes. And if you have a very powerful position, a powerful base, freedom of speech can threaten that power base for you. So I don't think there's a coincidence that freedom of speech is not something you have everywhere. It's too powerful and needs to be curtailed for some regimes. And in order to sort of understand how we think about open, I think it's also important to go through some of the things that we believe being open is not. For example, the Pirate Bay is a place where it initially started by freeing music. I mean, music was very or not available in a digital form. So if you wanted to listen to music, you had to buy maybe a hard copy like a CD or something else. You had to transfer that CD into your computer somehow, maybe through a CD drive or whatever, and start listening to music. While everything else like documents and images and stuff like that was being transferred very quickly, very easily, and you could search and mix and match whatever you wanted very easily. So Pirate Bay started as an activist group trying to free the music. And it was a clear signal to the music industry that they had to put their act together and do something. But being open is not the same as making everything free, making everything sort of without cost. I think that's a misunderstanding. Today we have reasonably good sort of business models where you pay for a subscription on maybe some streaming service. So you actually pay for your music, but you do have access to it. Much better access to it than you had before. So being open is not the Pirate Bay way where everything has to be free. Free as in free beer, not as in free speech. So it's not about being a zealot, being sort of very fundamentalistic in the term open. So everything has to be open. There is no questions. There is no sort of argument. Everything has to be open and that's the only way to go. No, that's not the case either. And it's not a case where all data has to be free at any cost. You know, information needs to be free. Yes, I think that's the case in many cases, but this is not at any cost. And finally, I don't think being open is in contradiction to being secure. There is a lot of value that needs to be securely or secured in a proper way. It has to do with national security. It has to do with your own properties. It has to do with your own sort of valuables. And it's natural to protect them as best we can. I know, for example, in Norway, we're building a new governmental offices, and everything that's being done in terms of design and construction and all the digital collaboration there happens in a very secure environment, not connected to the internet, their own sort of data centers, etc., etc. I may not necessarily agree that is always the right case. Sometimes maybe it's necessary, and sometimes it's a good security measure in order to make things as secure as possible. But I think it would be a mistake from the Norwegian government to secure the building on the assumption that none of the data is available to the bad guys. If you secure the building by thinking that all the data is probably available with the bad guys, then I think you'll get a much more secure building. And I think that's the approach you have to take in this day and age where everything is digital and so easy to sort of copy and shift around. But being open is not against security. Being open also supports strong security measures where they are necessary. So what does being open really mean for your organization? An open organization is, I would say, inclusive. So that means it's open to anyone from any culture with any opinion, and generally being acceptive to all kinds of different opinion, different sort of perspectives, different ways of looking at things. So an inclusiveness is part of the open sort of way. An open organization is also what I would say is long-lasting. Because of the open nature, it has the ability to capture what's going on outside, what's a potential threat to the organization, what's a potential opportunity, and never closing the eyes for something like that, and hopefully never experience what Kodak experienced when the digital era came in full blast. So it's adaptive to outside change because of the open sort of eyes that sees this. An open organization is also creative, open to new ideas and different thinking. Traditional sort of brainstorming sessions, all the textbooks about this are very clear that there is no sort of, you do not put any limits on what you can say. You do not limit what people sort of try to contribute to. You may come up with something that has nothing to do with whatever you're trying to solve, but the fact that you actually mentioned that may have triggered an association to someone else that came up with something that was really important for the problem you need to solve. So limiting something in a brainstorming session is thought to be bad for the productiveness of the brainstorming session. So with an open organization, you will have more sort of creativity blossoming and bubbling up in the whole organization. So that's what I believe an open organization is about. So being inclusive, being longer lasting because of the adoption to outside change, and also being very creative because it has an open attitude inwards and outwards for itself. Now, what does being open mean for your processes? So the workflows that you have in place and all the processes that you typically do in your business in order to reach your target. For example, building a building or building a built asset. If you think about a process that is built on some kind of openness, we believe that is a free process. That means it adapts to changing context. So for example, one day you're thinking of doing something on your construction site, and suddenly it starts raining. You didn't see it coming, it wasn't forecasted, but the rain is there, and you have to sort of change and do something else on that day. So you have to adapt to the changing context that your process is in. Another thing about a process that's based on openness is it's creative. So you keep looking at ways of doing things a little bit different in order to do them more efficiently. Toyota was very good at this and sort of put this into a more industrial perspective, where they keep improving all their processes, keep fixing them little by little, so that all the time the efficiency of the whole organization, whole process improves. And finally, an open process is also inclusive in the sense that it includes a feedback loop. So you're open and honest to what's not working here, and you're taking that feedback and trying to fix it for the next sort of round. That could change over time, because over time things change. It could be very good in the first 2 years, and in the last 10 years it's not good at all because something in the society or something else or new technology or whatever have changed. And a process based on some kind of open sort of trade has all these in place, which is good. And finally, for your software, what needs to be happening there for that to be open? So your software tools are inclusive. So that means they integrate with everything. So the data that you have in your software tools should be able to be used by other software tools as well, and should be able to be shared across whatever software boundaries you have. Software tools should be long lasting. If they're open, they sort of keep improving, and your data will never be lost. So that means your data in an open-based software tool is available for long-term storage on formats that are open, for example, or you can take it out whenever and keep them there for as long as you need them. That's good for buildings, because built assets normally last a long time compared to what software typically do. And it needs to be open, so meaning built on open standards and no vendor lock-in. If you put something into, if you use a software tool, you shouldn't be forced to be using that for the rest of your life. You should have the freedom to choose whatever software packages you want, and the software packages that are always the best in breed at any given time. So these are some of the thoughts that we have on your organization, your processes, and the software tools that you use. Now, how do we fix the planet? So if we focus on the AECOO industry, just to make the complex problem a little bit simpler, I think it has a lot to do with data. So data is kind of like the foundation of everything. And if you have good data, you might be able to do some interesting things. For example, data will help us lower our CO2, because unless we have the data that can tell us how much CO2 we're spending or how much CO2 we're putting into the atmosphere based on whatever we're building at the moment, we won't know how to reduce it. So we need all the CO2 relevant data that we can for all the process. That means what amount of CO2 was released into the atmosphere by producing this slab of concrete, or this piece of HVAC equipment, or what have you. We also need to reduce materials use, so data can help us with that. If we can get an idea of how much material and what kind of material are being used in whatever we use to build something, we can start figuring out how we can reduce that, how we can do it more effectively, how we can reduce waste on site, for example, because we're cutting up things and adjusting things on site. We could have maybe prefabricated stuff, have more efficient factories, building parts that we need to sort of assemble on site. And data will help us reduce the use of energy that we have. If we can gather all the relevant energy data that we have, energy we use when we're doing something on site, energy we use when we choose, or when we are designing something, how much energy is being used for this particular design configuration or that particular design configuration. If we have all that energy or all that data available, that will help us start reducing, start fixing, start incrementally move towards a 100% sustainable industry. But data will need to be trusted, it will need to be available, and it will need to be open in order for us to do all these things. So if you have a lot of data but you can't access it, it's not going to help us. If you have a lot of data but it's not really trusted, it can't really help us. I believe that a lot of the data that's in the building information models that are being produced today are maybe not stuff that we need to trust or can trust. They're a little bit random, a little bit less there for a single purpose, and a little bit more there as a coincidence. That needs to change. A small detail that some projects are hitting their heads against in Norway these days are the GUIDs that are used and implemented in the building information models. When you design something, they change often. So if you start relying on the GUID on this wall, and the next revision of that design model, the GUID of that wall has changed because the library was updated or because the designer decided to do something differently or whatever. So the GUID there, in order to have consistent data sets, is not reliable anymore, and that needs to be fixed as well. So I think there is a lot to be said for opening up the AECOO industry, so architecture, engineer, construction, operations, and owners. And because we also need to innovate and fix the processes and legal contracts, etc., we need to have an open dialogue and collaborate intensely. And why this will work, why I think this will actually work for us? Well, if you look at history, for example, in 1993, HTML, the World Wide Web, was invented. So the standards that every single web page out there is written in was invented in 1993. In 1994, 1 year later, Amazon starts, which has been a tremendous boost for buying stuff online. In 1998, Google starts, which uses the standard HTML to scan all the web pages out there. Because they were accessible, they were openly available, they were written in a standardized format, it was easy for Google to start scanning everything. In 2000, there was a dot-com crash, so the market kind of corrected itself. There was too much hype. But in 2004, Meta or Facebook starts, and in 2007, you have the first iPhone. So in a reasonably short period, with a lot of innovation and wealth generation, this happened because the computers could connect openly through open standards. So not only the internet standard of TCP/IP and all that stuff, and the email standards, but also the HTML and web standards. This was an explosive innovation part that we're probably still in and can enjoy a lot and gain a lot from. So if we did the same for the AECOO industry and apply the resulting innovation to making our industry 100% sustainable, I think it will work. I think we will get there quite fast, but we're depending on this being open. So what will be the next disruption for the AECOO industry? Will it be artificial intelligence? A lot of hype around it right now and really amazing stuff coming out. Or will it be robots or a combination of the two? Or perhaps it's the attitude of being open that will actually be the disruptive force that will bring our industry to the next level and bring us to a 100% sustainable position where we can save our planet and live happily ever after. Thank you so much for listening in and taking part in this moment of sharing how we think about this. Are there any questions or comments or reflections or anything at all? We'll be happy to sort of discuss it and talk about it right now. We have a few more minutes before we end the webinar. Eva, did we get any questions or comments or reflections out there?
So some of them say thank you, and yes, thank you, Ovad. How is Catenda Hub open? Someone asking, how is the product actually, they are open in Catenda? That's
a very good question. There are a number of ways that we try to make sure that it is open. So one fundamental thing is that it's built on open standards. So we're using the IFC standard to communicate and manage and store IFC or BIM data. We're using the BCF standard to communicate and store and manage all the communication data. So every sort of dialogue that happens between participants in a project. We're using standards like HTTP, so that it's a standard web site that can be used by any browser. We're using, standard ports and stuff like that. We're, constantly following up on whatever standards of PDFs and things of that nature that we can use. So that's sort of the fundament of this. The other way of trying to live by the open sort of tagline here is to have a well-documented API, set of APIs based on REST, which is a open technology, very well documented, very well used all over. The authentication process is an OAuth, which is again an open standard being used by most people out there. And having that open API, we're allowing us to share the data or integrate or push data or get data from other sources or bring data into other sources. Even the whole engine that we have is available for others to build upon. So even competitive software that are other collaboration software solutions are using our technology to better themselves. So we share with our competitors either the data or even our technology to try to live by the open ethos. I hope that answered the question.
Yes, I think so, yeah. Thank you. Someone say thank you again, and there is a question more related to, I would say, our building smart involvement. So can you make please this clearer about how we contribute to building smart?
Yeah, that's also a good question and something I probably should have mentioned, but I think it's important for vendors like ours to take some of the resources that we have and put it back into the AECOO community, if you will. So we spend a significant amount of time contributing to building the new standards of tomorrow. So for example, the Open CDE initiative, which also includes the BCF standard, is part of the solution that we're contributing. So we're in the committee or in the group that develops and further pushes this standard out there. And of course, we're then also implementing that support for that in our own software. We're helping with the IFC standard. We're helping with we've been very much involved in the BCSDD Building Smart Data Dictionary standard that's coming out now. And so forth. So we think it's important for us and for the industry that we help further develop and work on the design and implementation of the new standards of the future. That allows not only us to build upon this, not only the end users that should ultimately benefit the most, but also our competitors can build on this, of course, to everyone's benefit.
Great, thank you, Avad. And someone asked about how do you see Catenda in a few years about being maybe more open, even more?
So it's always a goal for us to be as open as possible. Obviously, as I said, we're not going to be open in terms of like reckless open. We want to protect our business interests, of course. We want to obviously protect our customers' interests. That's at the top of everything. So we cannot be like, depending on what you mean by 100% open, but we cannot be open in all aspects in all ways. But we try to be as open as we can. So internally, we put a lot of emphasis on being open. So we share every month all the financial data and the financial situation of Catenda to all the employees. We share about the good things happening. We share about the difficult things happening, the challenging things happening. So that everyone kind of knows and is at the same page internally in Catenda. At the same time, we also try to be as open as we can towards our customers and our business partners. We rarely tend to hide or sneak around things. We say it as it is, and we we'd like to have an open and honest communication instead of something else. So we will always try to be as open as we can within the limits that we have as being as a for-profit organization and so forth.
Great, thank you. I think that's pretty much it for today. And there are a lot of people say thank you. So yeah, thank you very much, Håvard.
Thank you very much, everyone, for listening in, and welcome back on the next webinar.
Yeah, thank you. Have a nice day. Bye.
Bye.